January 2nd, 2000, Asheville, North Carolina. A winter evening where the air felt strangely thick, despite the cold, the kind of night where the streetlights cast long, ghostly shadows across the damp pavement and every sound footsteps distant. Engines, the metallic rattle of a shopping cart, seemed to linger longer than it should. For most, it was just the last weekend before the routines of the new millennium settled in. For 18-year-old Zeb Wayne Quinn, it was a night that would become the first page of a mystery, still unsolved to this day. Zeb was a quiet presence in most rooms, polite, slightly shy, but always observant. He was a recent graduate of Roberson High School, working at the local Walmart while taking classes, and dreaming of joining the U.S. Air Force. He was dependable, the kind of friend who would offer a ride without thinking twice. That evening, he clocked out of his shift and made plans with a coworker, Robert Jason Owens, to check out a used Mitsubishi Eclipse Zeb had been eyeing. He'd been saving for months. This was supposed to be a quick drive to McDowell County, to see the car, then back home. Nothing complicated. The surveillance footage from Walmart later captured their exit. Zeb left work in his own Cara Mazda Protegons, following close behind in his truck. The two vehicles pulled into the darkening night, heading west along Interstate 26. Traffic was light, and the road was slick from an earlier drizzle. This was supposed to be routine, but somewhere along the way, a quiet deviation from the plan would set the course for everything that followed. Roughly 9 p.m., they stopped at a convenience store along Hendersonville Road. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Zeb. What happened next was reconstructed only from Owens later. Accountanda's version left more questions than answers. Owens claimed that as they drove toward the car seller's address, Zeb suddenly flashed his headlights, signaling him to pull over. According to Owens, Zeb said he had received a Pajan emergency that required him to turn back toward Asheville. Owens said they parted ways at that point, and he never saw Zeb again. That explanation never quite fit. For one, Zeb's beeper records and phone calls from that night revealed cryptic, conflicting leads. And 2 days later, Owens would be treated at a hospital for injuries he claimed came from a second, unrelated car accident, one that conveniently destroyed much of his truck's front end. Investigators noticed he also bore scratches and broken ribs, signs that suggested far more than a minor fender bender. But in those first crucial hours, no one realized how serious the situation had become. Zeb's family only knew that he didn't come home that night. His mother thought maybe he'd stayed with friends. By the next day, when he still hadn't appeared, the worry began to set in. Calls to his pager went unanswered. Friends checked. His usual hangouts? Nothing. The tension escalated further when, 3 days later, Zeb's car was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Little Pigs Barbecue on McDowell Street, just a short drive from where he was last seen. The discovery was bizarre enough, but it was what was inside that turned the case from strange to chilling. The back window was partially propped open. A live puppy was inside, and on the windshield was a drawing of a smiley face with exclamation points. There were also several items that did not belong to Zeb: a hotel keycard, a jacket, and bottles of drink. The puppy appeared unharmed, but nothing about the scene made logical sense to investigators. The car was a silent witness to something deeply wrong. Whoever left it there wanted it to be found and wanted it to send a message. But what message, and to whom, was still unclear. What was certain was that, from that night forward, Zeb Quinn had vanished without a trace. The first chapter of this mystery ended with the image burned into the minds of detectives: a young man's car, abandoned under fluorescent streetlights, holding a frightened puppy, and surrounded by inexplicable clues. It was as if someone had staged a scene, not just to confuse, but to taunt. The morning after Zeb's disappearance was unremarkable to most of Asheville, but in the Quinn household, unease had already taken root. His mother noticed his bed was untouched. His laundry was still folded neatly on the chair in his room. His work schedule hung on the corkboard by the kitchen. With today's shift highlighted, He never missed a shift. But the hours ticked by, and his absence hardened into something heavier. The first official ripple came when coworkers at Walmart confirmed he hadn't shown up that morning. Zeb was known for punctuality. Even on days off, he tended to stop by, check in with friends, or pick up extra hours. The alarm grew louder when calls to his pager went unanswered. In 2000, a missed page might have been inconvenient, but for Zeb, it was out of character. His friends began quietly asking if anyone had seen him after he left with Owens. Owens' story was repeated to family and investigators. Zeb received a page while on the way to see the eclipse, turned around, and vanished into the night. No specifics on the page, no clear reason, just a sudden diversion. It sounded too neat, too vague, yet there was nothing concrete to dispute it yet. 2 days later, when Owens himself landed in the hospital, the narrative shifted. He claimed to have been in another accident after parting with Zeb. His truck had front-end damage consistent with a collision, and he bore injuries to his head and chest. He didn't tour, wouldn't connect this event to Zeb's disappearance. But for detectives, the coincidence was too sharp to ignore. The search for Zeb began in earnest. Interviews with friends, calls to numbers in his beeper records, checks on his known hangouts. Asheville's wooded outskirts were combed by small search teams, but winter vegetation swallowed clues. No one had seen him. No one admitted to being with him after Owens. Then came the break, though break felt like the wrong word. On January 6th, Zeb's Mazda was found in the parking lot of Little Pig's Barbecue, a modest local spot along a busy stretch of road. The location was strange. He had no known ties to the restaurant. The car was locked, but the rear window had been cracked open. Inside, a small Labrador mix puppy paced anxiously. Someone had left it food and water, as if ensuring it survived until the car was found. But that was only the first oddity. On the windshield was a crude drawing of a smiley face, 2 exclamation marks jutting from its head. The passenger seat held a hotel keycard to a nearby inn. A jacket lay in the back seat. None of these items belonged to ZBB. It was a tableau. As unsettling as it was confusing, investigators tried to make sense of it. Was the puppy a gift? A warning? A decoy? Why the smiley face? Why a keycard from a hotel he never visited? Every detail seemed like a thread, but each one frayed before it could be followed. The car was dusted for prints. None matched Zeb. The puppy was taken in by animal control, but no owner came forward. The keycard was traced back to a room registered under a false name. It was, in effect, a nest of dead ends. By the week's close, the case had grown from a missing persons report to a cold tangle of contradictions. The last verified fact was painfully simple. Zeb left work with a coworker to look at a car. He never came back. Everything after was a storm of half-truths and unanswered questions. The search widened as January wore on, but the trail was already dissolving. The wooded areas around Asheville in winter were a patchwork of bare trees, damp leaves, and hidden ravines. Search teams worked grid by grid, but without a starting point. They were searching the whole world. Dogs picked up faint traces that led nowhere. Helicopters scanned for disturbances in snowless ground. Nothing. Owens' role came under sharper scrutiny. Detectives interviewed him multiple times, comparing each version of his account to the last. Small inconsistencies surfaced: the exact time they parted ways, the wording of Zeb's supposed reason for turning back, the details of his second accident. He was neither ruled out nor arrested. In 2000, without physical evidence, suspicion alone wasn't enough. Rumors began to swirl. Some whispered that Zeb had been caught in something: illicit debts, jealousy, a dangerous crowd. Others suggested he had run off voluntarily, though his close friends dismissed it immediately. Zeb had future plans: Air Force enlistment, steady work, a family that depended on him. Disappearing made no sense. Then there was the phone call. Days after his disappearance, Walmart received a call from someone claiming to be Zeb, saying he was sick and wouldn't be coming to work. The voice didn't match his, and the number was traced not to Zeb, but to the home of Owen's aunt. It was an inexplicable connection, another piece that didn't fit. Owens said he had no idea how that happened. In cases like this, time was the enemy. Each day without a lead allowed memories to fade, evidence to scatter. By February, the official search had shrunk to background checks, occasional interviews, and quiet monitoring of financial activity. There was none. The file on Zeb Quinn was growing thick with paper, but thin on substance. And somewhere in that gap between fact and speculation, the truth remained buried. By early spring of 2000, the name Zeb Quinn had already faded from the casual conversations of Asheville's streets. The disappearance was still covered in the local press, but each article was shorter than the last, a few paragraphs, buried between sports scores and council meeting notes. For his family, however, every hour was an echo chamber. The unanswered questions grew heavier with time, and the silence around them seemed intentional. As if someone was working to make the case dissolve, detectives worked the file quietly, but leads were brittle. The hotel keycard from the car had been a promising avenue, yet every inquiry came back with dead-ends false registration names, no security footage, and no employee who remembered a man matching Zeb's description. The puppy, once a small point of hope, was an even thinner lead. No one claimed it, no one linked it to Zeb, and in the absence of evidence, it became an odd detail filed away rather than explained. The smiley face on the windshield, though dismissed by some as a meaningless prank, haunted the case notes. Investigators knew that such symbols sometimes appeared in harassment or intimidation taunting gestures meant to unsettle anyone searching for the victim. In this case, the smiley face wasn't traced to anyone in Zeb's circle, nor was it seen as a signature of a known offender. Still, it lingered as a mark of deliberate staging. Owens remained the figure investigators could never quite push into the background. His hospital stay, after Zeb vanished, the call from his relative's home to Walmart, and his shifting timelines placed him perpetually close to the center. Yet his story never quite broke. Without a confession, physical evidence, or a witness, the case stalled. Privately, the Quinn family began their own inquiries. Friends, co-workers, distant relatives, they reached out to anyone who might hold a scrap of information. Some gave vague hints, others changed their stories mid-sentence, and a few shut their doors entirely. The pattern was unsettling. Either no one knew anything, or someone knew too much. The weight of that silence pressed down hardest at night. Asheville's streets, quiet under the soft orange glow of street lamps, seemed unchanged from the night. Zeb disappeared. The road to see the eclipse, the dark shoulder where Owens claimed they parted, the lot where the Mazda was found, each place sat frozen in time, an unbroken crime scene waiting for answers. The case entered its second year without resolution. Detectives rotated through assignments, evidence boxes shifted shelves, and the cold case label began to hover over Zeb Quinn's file. Public attention dwindled almost to nothing. Only the family kept the search alive, making calls to investigators, appearing on local television, and circulating flyers in grocery stores and laundromats. In the background, Asheville changed. Businesses opened and closed, neighborhoods developed, and new crimes took over headlines. The lot where Zeb's Mazda had been found filled with cars each day. Customers coming and going from the barbecue restaurant unaware of the grim history, a sighting in another state. A man claiming to have overheard a confession in a bar, a report of a shallow grave in the woods. Each lead was pursued, and each lead evaporated. No remains were found. No credible witness came forward. Owens kept his life moving. He changed jobs, moved homes, and kept a low public profile. In the absence of charges, he was legally free to live without the shadow of guilt in the eyes of the law. But for those following the case closely, his proximity to the disappearance was impossible to ignore. The Quinn family marked each anniversary with quiet gatherings. Birthdays, holidays, family events, they all carried an empty chair. The uncertainty was corrosive. Without a body, there was no funeral, and without a funeral, there was no closure. The questions did not just linger, they multiplied by the 5th year. Zeb's case was reduced to a folder in the cold case unit, revisited only when something new surfaced, and for nearly a decade, nothing did. It wasn't until 2015 that the silence cracked. A tip, long buried in unrelated files, resurfaced. It pointed to a property linked to Owens and suggested that Zeb's remains might be there. Detectives now working in a climate of renewed public interest in cold cases secured warrants and began a search. The property was sprawling wooded sections, outbuildings, and a small, neglected pond. Cadaver dogs were brought in, their handlers working methodically. Ground-penetrating radar scanned the soil for anomalies. For days, investigators dug, sifted, and cataloged. Each shovel of earth was wet with decades of rain, layered with leaves that had fallen year after year since 2000. But there were no human remains. The pond was drained and scoured, the outbuildings were searched, the woods swept with metal detectors. They found artifacts-sold tools, discarded bottles, scrap metal, but nothing that could close the case. Owen's connection to the property remained a subject of scrutiny, yet the search's failure to produce evidence meant the case stayed in limbo. The brief surge of hope for the Quinn family gave way to the familiar weight of disappointment. Still, the search did something important. It pulled the case back into the public eye. New witnesses, emboldened by time, began contacting police. Some spoke of rumors they'd heard in 2000, others of behavior they found suspicious in the years since. None were the missing puzzle piece, but each added a contour to the shape of what might have happened. Today, the disappearance of Zeb Quinn remains an unsolved mystery. The last confirmed sighting of him was on January 2, 2000, leaving work in the company of a man whose story has never been fully reconciled with the facts. His car, found days later, was a still life of contradictions. An unknown puppy, a smiley face on the windshield, a hotel keycard to a room registered under a false name. For 25 years, these fragments have refused to assemble into a coherent picture. They are a scattering of pieces that might belong to different puzzles entirely. The police file, now yellowed and thick, holds every false lead, every theory, every scrap of tangible evidence. It also holds a void and absence that mirrors the missing person it seeks to explain. The Quinn family still keeps his memory alive. They speak of him in the present tense, unwilling to let go without proof. They still believe someone knows exactly what happened that night, and that the truth has been kept hidden by layers of fear, loyalty, or guilt. As for Asheville, it moves on in the way small cities do, growing and changing around its unsolved tragedies. The lot where Zeb's Mazda was found is still there, as ordinary as ever, passed daily by people with no idea of the story that unfolded there a quarter-century ago. The vanishing point, the last moment Zeb Quinn was seen, has never shifted. It remains fixed in time, a place between certainty and oblivion. And until the missing piece is found, it will stay that way. A silent night in January, a dark road, and a young man who drove away and never came home.